This is Spoil Me, covering Heartstopper, Season 1, Episode 3, Kiss. In this episode, they kiss. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Elyn for commissioning this episode. Elyn, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. I don't know if it's Elyn, but Cindy let me know that you were the one who contributed to this episode and the next one. So thank you so much for contributing to that and helping us get the whole series booked. And I believe Cindy is already working on getting the second season booked. So I'm very happy about that. You guys, I am absolutely dying. This episode was probably the worst one to stop at. Like, I occasionally indulge in a little fantasy about watching ahead a little and pretending I didn't. But I can't do that. I just can't, especially with a show like this where so much depends on like the tension of the thing. I can't just be like, oh yeah, I have no idea what could happen next. It's when I say it's a thin plot, I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean like it is an extremely focused, specific plot that if you get yourself spoiled at all, it's gonna really kind of fuck the dynamic up. So I just don't want to mess with it. But all I'm saying is that it did occur to me a tiny bit that if I just didn't press a button, it would start playing the next episode. That's all I'm saying. Cloak is saying it's a tough one. The first graphic novel also stopped at this point. I would literally oh my God. Oh, that's so rude. I have a question. Because in this episode, we get a lot more about Tao and Elle. Is it Ella or Elle? Are they as much in the cast as like in the manga, the way they are in the show? This is something that I've started to like understand a little bit better because you know how it is where you read something and then you kind of want to see it on screen. And then it turns out that because they need to make a contract with an actor for a certain role, that character winds up getting a lot more screen time than they did because they need to give them stuff to do in order to secure them as an employee, basically. So there's like a minimum that they can be in the script. And I'm just wondering if the friends are like given more screen time in this show because of things like that and just wanting to sort of spread the narrative out a little bit, or if it is just as much a plot point in the manga as it is in the show. Emily says all the side characters are more fleshed out in the show than in the book. Okay. That's kind of what I was expecting, to be honest. I won't say they don't feel as fully realized because that's not actually it. There's just something about the scenes that they're in that feel different than the rest of the show. And that's not a bad thing, but it definitely like there is a sense of change in the writing to me. Not exactly like they were written by different people. I'm not even sure that's true. Maybe the author of the manga wrote those other scenes as well, but just the tone changes enough that I was kind of like, I wonder if this is how this was, you know? Cindy says, in the books, Tao and Elle are part of Charlie's core friend group, although their story is definitely expanded in the graphic novels. Imogen isn't in the comic at all, and Isaac isn't either. Instead, Charlie has a friend called Aled. Or Aled, I'm not sure which way. The author of the books wrote the show too. Okay, That might be kind of fun. I wonder about that sometimes because like getting to do something slightly different but still within your own world that you created. You know, you got to walk that line where your audience who has read the manga is going to be expecting that, but you also want to do something a little bit fun and change it up for your own sake to keep your own interest. Cloak says the author's name is Alice Oseman. Okay, noted. I will probably not remember that. You'll probably have to remind me. Cindy says, oops, expanded in the show, not the books. Yeah, I got you. So, okay. Let's start at, I was going to say let's start at the beginning, and I guess we have to. I kind of want to get the Tao thing over with, and I guess since everybody who's listening has watched the show already, I don't really have to go exactly play by play, but I'm going to just go ahead and do this. So Charlie gets invited to a party, and I will talk in detail about everything that leads up to that. But this results in him texting his friends in utter exultation after this invite. And I had been giving Tao a lot of benefit of the doubt and understanding regarding the way that he was approaching Charlie's crush on Nick. And I was really trying to see it as a concerned friend who doesn't want their friend who is a sensitive type who has been hurt before, you know, there's precedent for this. He doesn't want to see him get hurt again. And as much as Tao was sort of irritating me with some of the tone of what he was doing, I tried to like restrain my annoyance with him. And then this episode, I started to really get frustrated. And again, it's not as if his behavior is totally out of bounds or anything. It's not. It's just really self-absorbed in a way that isn't fun to watch. And that's not a criticism of the writing. A lot of human nature is not fun to watch. But his reaction, because like Charlie has shared with all of them that he got invited to this party, and I think his name is Jeff is the guy whose party it is, or is he Isaac? And this is a popular dude with a really rich family, and the party is a big deal. And when we see the party, this is one of those things where I'm like, first of all, he's telling everybody, oh, the party's this Saturday. If you are going to these lengths for a party, this place is entirely bought out. He's got a DJ, light setup. This would have been an event everybody knew about 2 months in advance, but it does not matter. It's fine. So he gets invited, and it's like part of the popular crowd. The fact that he has been invited is a big deal in that sense. But of course, the reason Charlie's excited is because Nick is the one who asked them. Harry's party. Thank you, Cindy. And the way that Tao reacts is this Saturday, but that's supposed to be our film night. Now, my instinctual reaction here was, all right, that does suck, Charlie, that you didn't even like think of that. I understand leading with the thing that you're excited about, but you may have wanted to approach this a little differently. So at first Tao's being like, but that's the same night. And I'm like, you know, waving that off. And then he follows up when Charlie says, can't we do that some other night? Which he could have been more tactful, but whatever. He's excited. Tao responds with, film night is sacred. Elle and Isaac back me up on this. And that was the point where I started to be like, Tao, what are you doing? Because I'm watching the screen has 4 parts so we can see each of their faces as they're texting. And I can see that Elle and Isaac do not have the problem with this that Tao has. So when he's asking for them to back him up, what it felt like he was saying was to like help me bully our friend into not being excited about the thing he's excited about anymore. And that sucks, you know? So I really appreciated and was so glad to see Elle immediately kind of like back Charlie, actually, and be like, we'll have another film night. I say go, it'll be just the 3 of us and we'll still have fun, which of course Tao is very annoyed by. So then we go to Tao's house and Elle is arriving and Tao's mom is like, loves Elle so much, which is really, really sweet. I was so glad to see a parent being like truly supportive and just like, oh, it's my girl. And they go up to his room and their film night is really funny to me. They just watch it on a laptop, which like there's nothing wrong with doing that when it's only 2 people. And I don't know if they had a plan for it to be different if there were all 4 of them, but like all 4 of them crowded around this little screen, I feel like would have been really awkward. But I say that probably I would have done that in college. I don't know. Or high school. So Tao starts talking to Elle about how Charlie's changing. And he frames it as Nick is stealing him away from us. Which I truly... She responds here and later with, that seems a bit dramatic. And I am the kind of person who really has... when somebody tells me I'm just being dramatic about something, on the one hand, I am a very dramatic person. And I recognize 100% that is a character trait. Like, that is real. And I will be. And that happens. On the other hand, I have had that said to me by a person who just truly didn't care about what I was upset about in an extremely dismissive way. And that happened young enough and often enough that I have a real knee-jerk reaction to that, the tone in which it can be said. So it really says something about how I'm viewing Tao, that when Elle says that's dramatic twice, both times, I'm just like, Elle is deeply correct. Like, if I am somebody who can be very sensitive to that and tends to hate when people say that, but I am in total agreement, you are being dramatic. Like, calm down. And basically, Tao is just acting like Charlie is being corrupted in this way where he is a totally different person now. When all that has been different is that he has a crush on somebody you don't approve of. That's literally it. You know? And yeah, he joined the rugby team. Has that changed anything about his personality in any way? I don't see it. He seems like the same kid. I am not feeling this panic. And what it comes down to is that Tao is like wanting, and he says, I wish everything were like old times. And Elle says, it's not old times. And he says, like, how he is resistant to change. She says sometimes change is good. And there's a real sort of like, right, buddy? Like, because clearly she has changed a lot. And so she's kind of being like, dude, come on. Things are going to do what they do. So I appreciated that he does sort of back off when it feels like she's hinting like that. But when he says again, I just wish everything could be like it's been. Can we like make a pact that will always put our friendship first? That's when alarm bells start going off for me. I completely understand being resistant to change. I really, really can be like that. And looking back at the number of times things wound up being so much better, despite me being certain the change that was coming was for the worse. I was wrong almost every single time. Like, I just, so I truly get what it's like, especially when you have friends that you feel you really connect with, that you have great memories with, that you feel supported by. I really understand when it seems like people are sort of drifting, the panic that can happen. I understand that in an intellectual sense. And I say it that way because, I forgot to mention, because Isaac's like, I'm sick, I can't come, have fun. And he sends like a smiley emoji that for me felt very knowing. I feel like he's aware that there's maybe a crush going on with Tao and Elle, and he's like leaving them alone on purpose and wingmanning a little bit. But anyway, I didn't have like a real tight friend group in high school. I had people that I was friends with that were a grade above me. And so I wasn't in classes with them. We only really hung out during like, when we were in drama together, we would do school plays and stuff, things like that. But it wasn't like the sort of thing where I was hanging out with them every weekend or anything like that. So when I left school, it was not the heartache for me. I stayed in touch with a couple people, but I never had the kind of group of friends that Tao has and is so like attached to. So when I talk about the pain of this sort of split, and it's not even really a split yet, but I could see how he feels it's going in that direction. The only real frame of reference I have is Owen, because Owen lives in the same town that he went to high school in and is still friends with a lot of his friends from high school. And when they began to move or change, he had a friend actually that transitioned and is going by a new name and moved to another state. It was hard for him. He is somebody who puts a lot of stock in friendship. He's very, very social. He loves getting together with people and doing stuff as a group, which can be hard because I'm a little bit more of a homebody. And when they started to do their own things, and especially when his friends began to have kids, because that really changes the availability they have. It changes the amount of energy they have to do things. It changes the dynamic of get-togethers when we have them because their kids are with them. He had kind of a hard time, and I think he's starting to get used to this new era, but it was a real difficult transition, especially like when we got married, knowing that a lot of his friends wouldn't be able to make it. And so when I say that I get where Tao's coming from, I mean that, like I said, intellectually, it is not coming from experience. But I want Tao, like, his asking, let's make a pact to always prioritize our friendship. Immediately, my instinctual reaction was that's not fair. And if you listen to the Song of Ice and Fire show that I do with Rashawn, I have talked more than once about my distaste for promises. I don't feel promises are very fair. There are times where a very broad promise is fine, but a lot of the time I think that promises set people up for like a feeling of betrayal that's not warranted, because circumstances can change dramatically from when you make that promise to what happens in your life. And making like elaborate vows and stuff like that had been mostly for a time where people didn't know how to read and write and couldn't sign contracts. So this was as close as we were going to get. But now when you tell other people, like, I want us to promise this thing, that is essentially him trying to like pin you into a corner so that he can behave as if you've done something to him if you don't agree to be as social with him as he wants to be. It just really felt manipulative. And it also felt like, what does that mean specifically? It's too vague. We promise we will always prioritize our friendship can very easily be, you don't get to have romantic relationships and turn down plans with me. Like, I had been feeling like he was being protective of Charlie because he is falling for someone that Tao thinks is straight. But now I'm starting to be like, would he have done this even if he knew Charlie were like with somebody who was also gay? Like if Ben came out and they were actually dating, I feel like Tao might react this way to Ben too. I don't think it's about the protectiveness anymore. At least not in, I think he is being possessive. And it's been mentioned more than once that Tao is straight. I'm not buying it. I'm going to be honest. He gives me bi vibes at bare minimum. But I guess we'll see about that. I just really wonder, is he like afraid of romantic relationships for himself as well? And he sort of wants everybody to put the brakes on because he feels out of his depth and doesn't really know what to do or how to approach things. It feels like there's something more going on here than just, I want to hold on to my friendships. It feels like a real kind of panic that is about him. And I'm like, you know, still thinking he's into Elle, and they hold hands. There's really nothing romantic feeling about it. I still can't tell what Elle feels, if she's into guys. I don't know. The fact that Isaac left them alone felt really purposeful, but it could just be on Tao's behalf, and Isaac has no idea how Elle feels, you know? Cindy says, I love when Tao is like, back me up on this. And Isaac just looked at his phone, rolled his eyes, and went back to his book. Yeah. Cloak says, yeah, it's unreasonable. He's not only limiting himself, he's also asking his friends to limit themselves. If nothing changes, nobody grows and learns. Yes. Emily says, I think season 1 isn't very sympathetic toward Tao and doesn't give you much insight into his motivation. He's sort of one of the antagonists of season 1. Yeah. And it's like, I'm trying not to be too hard on him. I don't think I am being too hard on him. I'm still being understanding. But it's just really frustrating because, and I will give this caveat that I don't think the show is trying to do this, but I'm going to describe a trope that happens so often, which is main character cannot pursue goals because someone in their life feels betrayed by their change in priority. And this is like a thing that can happen with somebody falling into a romance. It's also something that can just happen with a character like being interested in a goal. And it's one of those tropes that can work like any trope. It can be done well. You could have your main character actually lose sight of what's really important and go too hard on something and really just kind of like lose the big picture and need to get some perspective. When that is what's going on, and your main character is flawed in the way that they put blinders on and just hyper focus on something to the expense of all else, that trope works really well. But then you've got like movies where they create this like fake tension where a character hasn't actually done anything out of line or wrong, and they get accused of it, and apparently the movie wants me to believe they deserved to be accused. But to me, there was nothing out of line at all. I really enjoy the example of the movie Honey with Jessica Alba. If any of you have ever seen that movie, there is a makeup artist on YouTube who does makeup movie reviews. She'll like do her makeup to the theme of whatever the movie is, and she will give you a movie review as she's doing her makeup. And she does this amazing summary of Honey, and it's so funny. Honey is one of the worst. Like, and it's a movie about, oh, I want to dance and I'm being successful at dancing, but at what cost? And I have to remember where I'm from. And these people just like bite her head off for not letting her life revolve around them anymore. And then she like apologizes to them. And I remember the first time seeing it being like, she's just changing. What do you, the number one though for this, for me, is Devil Wears Prada. You guys. Oh my God. Devil Wears Prada is like one of the worst for me in terms of every single solitary message that movie is sending is so backward trash that it's like, you couldn't do this badly if you tried on purpose. It's just, there's just so much like gross fat phobia. There is so much weird, like abusive relationship drama. Every dude that she's involved with sucks, and I'm supposed to like root for. Ugh. Anyway, this, I was saying, I don't think this show is falling into that too hard, because so far, at least, we don't have Tao like giving Charlie ultimatums or anything, but I can't help but kind of feel like that might be where we're headed. It doesn't seem out of the question. Cindy says betrayal is very much the feeling. Tao was clearly very attached to a small friend group, and with Elle changing schools and everything was already different. Then when Charlie starts prioritizing time with Nick in this episode, it's like he feels like his whole world is falling apart. Cloak says, I've only ever watched one clip from The Devil Wears Prada, and one of the characters talked about only eating one piece of cheese. I decided that movie wasn't for me. Yeah, and it's like, the movie is set in the fashion industry, which is just so horrifically fat phobic that doesn't even feel like an adequate word. So it's not inaccurate. It's just that, like, for example, there's a point at which the main character, who was a size 6, she's literally called 6 by another character throughout the film, because it's a real, like, supposed to be a flaw of hers that she's a size 6. And then one of the moments of victory for her at the end is telling somebody that she's down to a size 4. And it's like genuinely supposed to be like fist pump moment. And I just remember being like, am I in the Twilight Zone? What are you doing? But she has this gross boyfriend he just demands 1000% of her attention. And she's got this career she's chasing, and he has no respect for it whatsoever. And the instant that she even hints she's going to put work ahead of anything, he cries like a baby. It's so sad. Anyway, so like I said, I don't think that's what we've got yet. I'm worried it's heading in that direction, though. And Tao's like, I appreciate that Elle is sort of reining Tao in a little bit, but it bummed me out that she agreed to the promise. Like, again, I just feel like he's setting things up so that he can have a very specific grievance to point to later when he feels betrayed, and it will seem like she's not allowed to argue because you agreed, you made this promise. And I just don't like or respect that kind of manipulation. So that's pretty much it for Tao. And that I just sort of wanted to get that out of the way so that we could talk about what else is happening. So we start off with Nick online looking at a bunch of like, how do you know you're gay? How can you tell? And one of the things is every time you see a straight couple, you wonder what the big deal is. And I really liked that one because sometimes I think that it can be, we will prioritize when we're talking about how to tell if something is important to you or if you are different from other people. The urges, like I'm attracted to guys and so I'm beginning to worry. But I like this pointing at, what about absences? Are there things that other people seem to really care about that just don't hit for you? And you're not really sure why everybody else gets so up in their feelings about it. Because that's like the sort of thing that is a little subtler and harder to notice in yourself. Or maybe you just like, you didn't even quite notice it. You know, if you're surrounded by straight friends and they all like are into girls and you're just not really feeling it, it would be very easy to sort of be like, I just haven't met the right girl. And just hand wave it away. But then you get asked a very specific question like, do you ever wonder why everybody gives a shit? And suddenly you're going, I guess I have wondered that. I didn't put it in those words. I thought it was understandable. But when I step back and look at it, I get like all of them just found a magical girl that they really like. No, they're just attracted to girls. Oh, and then things begin to fall into place a little bit. And he also is looking at like news attacks about homophobic, or news reports about homophobic attacks. And I like that it's not exactly like dwelled on here, but it is a factor in finding things out about himself. There's risk in coming out. It's just a fact. And it's just, it's a reality that we have got to talk about. I don't want that to hold people back because I want them to still be who they are, but I can't blame anybody who decides not to come out because they're concerned about that sort of thing. And as he is taking the test, his eyes are getting sort of wet, and he gets the result 62% homosexual, which is such like a weirdly specific number. And he like slams shut his computer and doesn't seem to know what to think or do. So we jump to him at school the next morning, and Harry comes up to him. It's this Harry kid. I really think it might just be that this kid isn't a good actor, because he's so awkward in a way that feels maybe like it's not supposed to be on purpose. I really wonder about Harry because he postures so much, and I'm not like calling him a poser. Being a poser and posturing are not the same thing. But it really feels in some ways like Harry is behaving as if he feels like he's being filmed. Like, you know what I'm saying? And that's why I'm sort of like, is it the actor, or is that an attribute that he's given to Harry? That Harry is so conscious of his image all the time that he is posturing. Like, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, he tells him, I'm here to talk about a party, my 16th birthday party, St. George's Hotel this Saturday. You're going to be there. And Nick says, yeah, sounds good. And he says, you'd better bring some cool people with you. And as he says that, Imogen turns her head and she comes right up to him and like wedges next to him and says, are you going to invite me? And you guys, I just really, Imogen, there's nothing wrong with her. I'm just going to like, the thing about Imogen is not that she is a bad person or even particularly annoying. If Nick were interested, this would be probably cute. But she's, one, getting in the way of my Charlie, so I don't like that. And two, I don't feel Nick's giving her any encouragement at all. And so the fact that she keeps persisting embarrasses me. It's like, it's not like I'm mad at her. It's like, honey, what do you think you're getting from him? Because it feels like you think the conversation's doing a different thing than it is. And even in this scene, she says, are you going to invite me? He says, well, only if you're cool enough, because that's what Harry just said, invite cool people. And she says, do you not think that I'm cool enough? And he says, fine, I guess I can invite you, Imogen. And when he says that, and you guys, it's the most half-hearted thing, she lights up. Yeah, definitely. And she completely squeezes in her mind and looks away from him. And I'm like, girl, you came up to him and yelled, are you gonna invite me? Like, in his face. So the fact that he did invite you is meaningless. You think you're scoring something here, that you're setting yourself up for a night, and you put him in a weird position where he wasn't going to just be like, no, I'm not inviting you, and be a dick. He's not a dick. But girl, you are attributing a motivation here when you made it happen yourself, basically. And it's just everything about how he hunches, how he like doesn't want to make eye contact. It's all bad, and she's not seeing it. Now, part of the reason why I have such a hard time blaming her, I know I was like this with certain guys too. I saw what I wanted to see. I just did. I know that. Doesn't mean that I want to see somebody else doing it. I do not. Thank you. Absolutely not. It's so painful. So this is when we go to the locker room. And you guys, is this the first time we've seen Nick's shirt off? Because your boy has some pecs. And like at the party, he's wearing this really tight t-shirt. And I was like, okay, Nick. Like, I feel like every other outfit, I haven't gotten any sense of him being a little bit jacked. And then all of a sudden this episode with him, his shirt off here, and then at the party, I was just like, oh shit, there it is. And I was kind of like, all right, well. He's super young, so I've already said it feels creepy. I think he's like, the actor's probably like 17 or something, you know, but he's probably like 25. He seems younger than that to me though. But, yeah, it was just sort of a moment of like, he just seemed kind of, I don't know, average isn't quite the right word, but you know, like, and then all of a sudden it felt like I was seeing muscles. So yeah, he's getting dressed and everybody is like joshing him about the party this weekend and the girls that are into him. And they are really insistent in a way that is, I think, I don't know if any of them have their suspicions or if this is purely just them trying to be friendly. But it's really pushy. And they're talking about Tara Jones, who's going to be at Harry's party, and that maybe he's interested. And, you know, as we know, that's not going to be a thing. And then there's Imogen, and all of these guys apparently are like, Tara and Imogen are both super fine. And I can't believe that you don't seem at all interested in either one of them. And I was really pleased, too, by the way, that they mentioned Tara being really hot, because so often black girls are not really, like, treated this way, especially by white dudes, like, you know, and she was certainly pretty when we saw her in the scenes with Elle, but when she gets dressed up for this party, I was like, oh, damn, all right, she looked fine as hell. She had like a whole look going, very 90s. Like she had the long sleeve scoop neck underneath the spaghetti strap dress kind of thing. But yeah, the vibe with everybody is just like, we're trying to get you excited for the party and get you talking about women. And he is so resistant and nobody seems to care how awkward he feels about it. He is not wanting to do this. And he makes eye contact briefly with Charlie, doesn't say anything, doesn't seem to know what to do. And I was like, what is going to happen here? We go to homeroom and Charlie comes and sits down next to him and he just blurts out, do you want to go to the party? And I really appreciated that Charlie doesn't say yes right away. He says it doesn't really seem like my thing, which I accept, you know, like, yeah, he just in particular was targeted, it seems like, by some of these guys. And why would you want to, you know, like, it's, yes, they're on his team and they seem mostly cool and supportive, but also that's different, you know? So anyway, Nick says, I want you to be there. And he also says, do you want to go to the party with me? Which is not what he said to Imogen. He said, I guess I could invite you, Imogen, in a very general sense. Here he says, do you want to go to the party with me? And I was just like, I peeped that. So, guys, the fucking glow in Charlie's face is too much. So then we get the text exchange where Tao gets all pissed off. Charlie is just kind of like, oh, well. And we jump to Charlie getting dropped off at the party by his dad. His dad is telling him, I'm coming to get you at 10. Charlie says 11, and he says, no, 10's late enough. I had an early curfew like this also. And I still get mad about it sometimes because I was like one of the most responsible kids. Yeah, I was out here having sex, but like mostly with the same person. And it was not a matter of the having a earlier curfew did not prevent anything. I'm just saying that. It just made me feel like a baby because all of my friends were allowed to stay out until 11, and having to come home early, especially if my parents didn't want to pick me up, they wanted me to get a ride, meant that I was going to have to like try and make somebody leave, which sucked. But so he gets dropped off, and there's like a weirdness with his dad that I was sort of worried about. But then later when he calls his dad up, or I don't know if he calls him, I don't know if it was 10. I got the impression he called, but it seemed like he actually has a pretty good relationship with him. Like his dad's trying, but doesn't really know how to handle things. But yeah, so he says, call me if you need me. And this is the only time have we met Charlie's mom? I don't think we've met his mom at all, have we? So, like I said, the party is hella rad. It's out of pocket, to be frank. Like, once he's inside, this place has multiple floors, and he like has bought out all the floors and every room on every floor. And there are light, what do you call them? I don't know, structures in all of the hallways. There are like effects going on with the lighting. It's the sort of thing that I want to assume this hotel just has those fixtures in place already for lighting, and that you can choose to pay for the package that's, you know, all the lighting gets set up for you. Otherwise, the money that they would have had to spend. For my wedding, and those who are interested, if you go back on my Instagram account, you'll see tons of wedding photos. But my wedding, I wound up springing for a lighting package, and it was only like, I think 5 floodlights. And that was an extra $500 just for that. I don't regret it because it looks unbelievable in the photos. Like, I'm so glad I did it. It just takes everything to a different level. But that was just for 5 plain floodlights set up against the wall, reflected up toward the ceiling. That's it. And this would be just so much money. Like, it's just is fucking banana pants. So I appreciate, though, that he asks about it later, and Nick tells him about how rich Harry is, and they talk about, you know, he should be on my super sweet 16, because sometimes these sorts of parties are just a thing in teen dramas, and it really set me up for some like unreasonable expectations as a kid. I would go to house parties expecting this sort of energy, and doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. Like, it's not to say there aren't ever any parties like this, but the vast majority are not. Vast. Anytime that you have something like this, you are almost always going to have adults all over the place. And there is nary an adult in sight. This is pure school kids. Like, it feels like a nightclub for their high school only. And, you know, this kind of event, for my family, it would have been all my aunts and uncles, like my dad's whole side of the family. It would have been a very, very different scene. So anyway, we see Imogen coming up to Nick, asking him how he likes her dress. I was so worried that like when Charlie turned up, he was going to catch them kind of looking like they're dancing and that it would be a thing. Thankfully, she walks away before that, and they are both clearly looking around for one another. So when they spot each other, you guys, the vibes between these two and the way they light up when they see one another, it is too much. Like, it's too much. I can't. And I just really want to point out how physical Nick is every time he sees Charlie. He says, "I was looking for you," and puts his hands on Charlie's shoulders. Later on, he grabs his hand to pull him like out of the room. He is the one initiating physical contact most of the time. And I feel like that really says a lot. So they go and like find a sofa that's sort of off to the side, and it seems like they're having a lovely time. But of course, his shit friends have to come and ruin it. So Harry's like, why are you over here? It's pretty boring, isn't it? I'm sorry. He says, it's a bit boring, isn't it? And every time that Harry says anything, he's got his pack of cronies behind him giggling in a, like, the sycophantic, he didn't tell a joke. There's nothing funny. They need to respond and signal to their chieftain that they heard him. And it's like so pitiful. And I appreciate Nick just being like, well, I'm hanging out here because he's my friend. Harry sits next to him. I got important news for you. Tara Jones is here. And again, Nick does not care. And they're not willing to believe him. I don't know if they just think he's really shy, I guess. But, he literally says, so what? So this whole thing is... Harry is trying to enlist Nick to, like, be like, oh, wouldn't this be romantic? Like, yeah, let's get this going. And he basically, like, pulls Nick to his feet and into the next room where Tara is standing and is like, do you remember Nick Nelson? And they walk away, leaving Nick there as if they've really done him a favor. Like, oh, look at us setting this up with this guy. And poor Charlie is watching Nick talk with Tara and seems to not know how to handle this. So he walks away, which, I mean, what else are you going to do? I get it. He's not going to go back and sit in that room where Nick's friends are still standing by himself. It's just super awkward, So then we get the conversation between Nick and Tara. And this is so great, you guys. I love this so much. So Nick is like, my friends think that, we should hook up, but I'm sorry. Like, it's not that you're not pretty. I just don't feel that way about you. And she says, this could all have been avoided if I had just told everybody I was a lesbian. And he says, well, I guess it's not something that you would want to lie about. And she says, it wouldn't be a lie. That's my girlfriend over there. And he's like, oh shit. And I really liked this next part. She said, we've been keeping it quiet. He says, why did you tell me? And she says, well, me and Darcy have been talking and we feel like we really just don't need to be quiet anymore. And he says, you're going to come out? And she says, we don't want to make a big announcement, but, maybe just not hide so much. And that was how a couple of my friends did it. They didn't come out. They didn't sit down and go, hey, I'm gay. They would just hold hands and kiss their girlfriend in the hall. It was just like, oh, okay. And I would just be like, guess that's happening. And there was something less pressure about that, I think, for everybody. I'm sure it was still a huge risk for them to kiss in public, but it was sort of nice that it almost felt like they were just accepting as a given that I would have no problem with it, that me and my other friends would have no problem with it. It was almost like, this is so nothing, it doesn't need a conversation. And, I can understand wanting to have a talk about it, but I also really see the appeal of doing it this way. And he says, wow, that's cool. I've only met one openly gay person before. Do you know Charlie Spring? And she says, I know of Charlie Spring. Are you friends? And he says, yeah, we sit next to each other in form. He's probably my best friend right now. And she gives him this look that I couldn't read. I was trying to decide if she's like savvy, like, does she sense something or what? I don't know. But her girlfriend comes up. What's her name again? Is it Darcy? And it says, like, asks if you want to go dance. She says yes. She walks away. And when Nick turns around, Charlie is no longer sitting there. And this is the worst, you guys. So Nick's about to go find Charlie. And Harry asks him, hey man, where are you going? And he says, I'm going to find Charlie. And Harry says, what, that nerdy little year 10? Why do you even hang out with him? He's my friend. But why? Do you feel sorry for him because he's gay? What? Oh my God, no. Wait. Do you think he has a crush on you? Oh my God, how sad. And Nick really looks like, I thought he might hit him. Like he gets that look that people in a rage, like who are just about to fucking lose it, get, where I can't look at you because if I make eye contact and look at you, I am going to completely go over the edge because I'm going to see your face laughing and I will not be able to handle it. So I'm going to look somewhere else and mentally try to calm myself down, was like the kind of vibe I got here. And he then says, that's homophobic, Harry. And it says in the subtitles, in brackets, chuckles nervously. Come on, mate. And Nick says, and I really don't like you. And walks away and then says happy birthday over his shoulder. And I was like, well, damn. Like, he just said it. All right, go Nick. I really loved too the dynamic of that conversation where Harry starts this off thinking he's going to be able to get Nick to to turn his back on Harry. Basically on Charlie. What Harry wants to do is to make Nick embarrassed of being friends with Charlie. And the fundamental thing that Harry doesn't understand about Nick is that he has integrity and isn't like completely, his actions aren't all dictated by what the people around him are going to think. Clearly, that's how Harry rolls. So he's using the same sort of intimidation tactic that would work on him. But Nick doesn't factor that in what he's going to do, you know? So, Cindy says in the books, he says happy fucking birthday, but they took out all the fucks. So it could have been a lower age rating. I never even thought about there being swears in this show. I don't feel like it really would have changed too much for me, in tone. I think it works totally well without them. So, I have no problem with swearing, but sometimes removing swears from something, the tone will change wildly. You know what I mean? But I would be interested to just see. But what happens when Nick decides that he's not going to play this game with Harry and he says that's homophobic? I loved that Harry's reaction is, come on, man. In a tone that's what Nick should have said to you. Come on, man. When you were being homophobic. But you're like, wow, you're really ruining the vibe by not laughing at my joke. And yet, despite that, come on, man, that could have been come on, man, what's the matter with you? Aggressive. It doesn't feel aggressive. It feels like Harry really begging a little bit. Come on, man. Don't put me on the spot like this. He resents that his bad behavior has been pointed out. And I 100%, that is the thing about people making these sorts of jokes, is that you're not supposed to put them on the spot. You're not supposed to point out how bad this behavior is. You're supposed to be a good sport and just be like, well, you know how he is later in the day when you're talking about it with your friend, because neither of you said anything. And folks like this depend on us being good sports to keep behaving this way. And when you flip it and go, what exactly does that mean? They have all the power a second ago because they had a crowd behind them chortling at what they were saying. When you flip the script and ask them to explain themselves, you suddenly have all the power. And that throws them off so completely that they can either be kind of pitiful, like Harry is, or they can blow up at you because they sense the change and they're not a fan. And I found it interesting. The way this goes is that Harry sort of like backs off here. Nick storms away. And then later, Harry tracks Nick down. And we have a really... the staging of the scene in which Harry has tracked him down and Nick is standing in what looks like a sort of anteroom. Like it's like they're in a sort of hallway, but it's like six-sided. It's like almost a round room with Harry in the middle and his friends in a half circle behind him. So that once again, Nick is like centered and alone on the opposite side of the room. And they are all observing him like he's in a fishbowl. And I was like, did they talk about what to do? Did they talk about going and finding Nick and talking to him? Or did Harry decide to do this on his own and his friends just go along with it because they go along with literally everything he does? Like, I couldn't quite tell. And what he says is, it's banter, which is like evidently based on some other shit that I have seen. Specifically, I think there was a stand-up from Sophie Hagen. Was that her name, Sophie Hagen? There's a stand-up comedian, and she's a fat feminist, and she talks about how people can say all kinds of bullshit, but then go, it's banter. So evidently this is like a real UK thing, even though people would say this in the US, it's not quite as much of a saying. And he says, like, I don't want you ruining the vibe of the party just because you're in a bad mood. And Nick says, yeah, you're right. I guess I was just in a mood. And he says in a mood. He doesn't say a bad mood. He just says in a mood. And Harry follows up with like, so we're cool? Like, you know? And Nick says, yeah, but then I've got to find the loo. And immediately walks away. And I was really bummed because it didn't feel like he stood by his statement. And he was, the way everything had just gone down, I really, really get that. But it also felt so significant that he backed down here. So, anyway, at this point, I've jumped ahead for that scene, but at this point, he has walked away. And we jump over to Charlie running into Ben in one of the hallways. And kids, I have got to tell you, I was so fucking worried. I thought Charlie was going to have a weak moment after it seemed to him that Nick had rejected him and that he was going to consent to hooking up with Ben again. And I was about to cry. Instead, because like, it maybe, I don't think so, but maybe could have gone that way if Ben hadn't been like a total asshole here. But basically, what he says to Charlie is, have you finished sulking about it? Which is so, I mean, Ben, genuinely, dude, what do you think you're accomplishing? And Charlie is just like, leave me alone, and starts to walk away. And Ben grabs his arm and says, oh, come on. Oh, come on is really the theme of people trying to do bullshit. And Charlie shoves him against the wall and says, don't touch me. And I was like, look at you, kiddo. Really grown up all of a sudden. So Nick finally, you guys, it's such agony. He's on the dance floor. Imogen wants to dance with him. He's like, I can't dance. And she says, I don't care. And she's just making like eye contact, arms around his neck. Do you like me? I really like you, Nick. And he looks so panicked. Like, And she says, you don't have to answer right now. I just wanted you to know. With an expression on her face that she's realizing she's not getting the reaction she was hoping for, but she is still kind of, I still have hope. Maybe it's not going the way I wanted here, but I put him on the spot. He's just shy. Probably it's still going to work out. And when he walks away, she's like, has a bit of a victory fist pump with her friends for a second. And I was like, guys, that did not feel like a victory. I don't know why you keep seeing victories where there ain't none, but okay. This is the moment where Nick spots Tara and Darcy dancing. And this is such a great moment because the two of them are just having an awesome time. And he sees them kissing and just actually being themselves with one another in front of everybody, literally in the middle of the dance floor, and just fucking going for it. And you can tell he is truly inspired, like the joy of this and them being unafraid. It's just everything, you know? And I love that the light behind them turns into a rainbow as all of the confetti falls. And he's just, there's a clear longing on his face of like, could we have that? Could I? And then the crowd comes together. They are out of view, and he resumes looking for Charlie and eventually spots him again on the couch where he had left him. And he goes over and is like, I was looking for you. And Charlie says, I felt like I was in the way, and your year 11 friends are kind of intimidating. Nick says, yeah, I don't know if I want to hang out with those guys anymore. I'd rather hang out with you anyway. And I was like, what do you even say to that? Well, Charlie very quickly changes the subject to how he ran into Ben. And I was like, flawless. Well done. So Charlie grabs his hand to tell him that he's proud of him. And then looks up and says, it's kind of noisy in here, isn't it? Do you want to go somewhere quieter? And I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. They have a little race up the stairs and they wind up in like a ballroom and have a little joking about the scale of this party. And Charlie says, so was Harry being serious? Do you like Tara? And Charlie says, no, or not Charlie. Nick says, no, definitely not. So you don't have a crush on anyone? Well, I didn't say that. And Charlie's face falls. Bless him. He doesn't get it. And you guys, I really want to give massive props to whoever directed this scene. It's hard to say. I think there are a few things happening here. The camera is up close with each of them in moments and then pulls way out in other moments, which I feel like really emphasizes how alone they are in that room right now. There's the sense that the party's outside, but they don't have like distant party music. It's dead silent in that room except for the two of them. And the fact that there's no music, there's no sounds coming through, for me, it really made me think of like scenarios that I have been in like this, where I have gone somewhere else and it's been suddenly really quiet after the intensity of all of the music at the party or the dance or whatever's going on. We go to a closet, or we go to a bathroom on the other end of the school, or go into somebody's car or whatever. So the whole like the fact that there's no sound except for the two of them makes it feel really, really, really intimate. And then these actors are unbelievable at capturing that frenetic energy of, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what he's going to say. Each word that comes out of their mouths feels a little unwilling, like they can't believe they're saying it. And all like, Emily says the scene follows the comic very closely. And that's the thing, like something can work in a comic and not work on screen. And something can be staged identically on screen and not work. It's not the staging, it's the way they handle it. I felt every instant of their excitement and their uncertainty, like in my gut. Like it was so nerve-wracking and exciting, and the leap of happiness that I got at the answers they were giving each other was so real. And it just felt like what those moments feel like, which is not easy to capture at all. It is really hard, actually. Usually these sorts of scenes are written with a tone to them, like everybody's a little too clever, you know? And the delivery of the lines, like I said, the lines themselves are excellent because of how simple they are. But the way they say them, like they're taking such a risk. Every word they say is there's no going back once they've said it, you know? So Nick says, why do you assume it's a she? Is it not a she? Would you go out with somebody who wasn't a girl? And then would you kiss somebody who wasn't a girl? And I think part of this, now that I'm watching the scene, what makes it work so well, the long pauses between the sentences, loaded pauses, like unreal. And he says, maybe. And Charlie inches his foot over and puts his hand down next to Nick's. And again, with the sort of, I can't believe I'm saying this, looks at him and says, would you kiss me? And Charlie's like almost in tears, it feels like, because he doesn't want to say no because he wants this, but it's a big step. Charlie touches him with his finger, his pinky finger on Nick's hand. And when he says, would you kiss me, the little flutters of flowers are around their heads. And Nick slides his hand closer and they like intertwine little pinky fingers and look at each other and then kiss. And you guys, it's a really good kiss. It's a really good, like on-screen kisses can be really hard to watch, you know, and these two, okay, like, oh my God. I was just like, how is this so hot? They're barely touching. It's just banana pants to me. The intense, and they pull away. There's oh my God, that just happened. Oh my God, that just happened. You can see Charlie kind of going, did it happen? Maybe he doesn't want it to have happened. He looks up and sees Nick looking at him. Nick takes his hand like full on and then goes into the kiss again. And this time Charlie puts his hand on the back of Nick's neck, which is always hot. Always a fan of that. And they kiss. And I was like, oh my God, you guys. And then fucking Harry has to interrupt and ruin everything. So I talked about that scene already. I hated this so much. And Charlie, after like saying he's going to find the loo, he goes right back to Harry. The room is empty. Harry bailed. I can't blame him. His friend yelled, and Nick leapt to his feet and sprinted out of the room. It's not great, however, Charlie really does leap to the worst possible conclusion. He, got picked up, and when his dad asks if he's okay, he just starts crying, and I really appreciated his dad just hugging him and not asking questions. He's not like, you want me to go kick their ass? He's just like, hey, man, it's okay. And I was pleased to see the way that his dad handled this, just, being there for him and being somebody safe for Charlie to cry in front of, because that is not as common as we would hope. So Charlie is just eaten up by this clearly. We see him in the morning checking his messages. There's nothing. And he assumes, of course, Nick really regrets this. He doesn't even want to get out of bed. He finally is brushing his teeth, and he has a moment of imagining if Nick just said no to him. And the doorbell rings. His mom asks him to go get it. He runs downstairs, and it's Nick standing there in the pouring rain in his hoodie, and he just says, "Hi." And I was like, oh my God. It was such a perfect ending. Cindy says, when I started the show, I thought they were going to get a whole season of Will They Won't They, so when they kissed on episode 3, I was floored. I had a feeling this was going to happen a little sooner than I would have predicted otherwise, based on the fact that Charlie was already searching whether or not he was gay, and seemed like, I was like, this doesn't feel like the show that's going to do that. But, if they had, I wouldn't have been shocked. I just kind of thought, but even so, episode 3 is very early. So, oh my God, you guys, I'm way over time. I really have to stop, but I'm so excited. I really want this to work out. And their kiss was so hot. That is just a good kiss. That was a kiss that I was just like, they're going to be doing more of that. You can tell. All right, I'm going to wrap, but thank you again so much to everybody for coming and hanging out with me. Thank you to Elyn for commissioning this, and I will be seeing you guys on Thursday. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.